Welcome to the deep dive. We gather up challenging sources, unpack them, and figure out how you can use the insights right away.
And today we're tackling a pretty huge synthesis. We've got sources spanning, well, millennia, really, from ancient Greek philosophers right up to modern business gurus.
Yeah, it's quite a stack, and they're all wrestling with this one fundamental question. What does it actually mean to be great? And why do we so often fail in executing on that?
It's a tough one, partly because, our instinct is to look outwards. We measure success by wealth or power or how persuasive someone seems.
The external stuff.
Exactly. But what our sources are suggesting today is that it's fundamentally flawed. It's looking in the wrong place.
So the mission for this deep dive is really exploring that tension, right? Between the outward appearance of success and the inner reality of character.
That's it. And specifically trying to figure out why just mastering those external techniques, persuasion, making money, why that tends to be unstable if you don't have that strong, disciplined internal foundation.
We'll definitely look at the how-to of success, like finding your own acres of diamonds, but we're going to pivot pretty quickly, I think, to this idea of the inside-out approach.
Yeah, why just having the techniques, the map, is useless if your own internal compass, your character, isn't pointing the right way.
So let's get into it. We'll start with this almost moral duty to get rich, then look at the discipline needed for modern success, and finally land on this ancient wisdom about character being the real key to influence.
And the sources are just fascinating. When you put them side by side, you've got Russell H. Conwell, almost this prophet of capitalism.
Right.
And then you contrast him with the really rigorous, data-driven discipline of someone like Jim Collins.
And then we connect those business ideas to the deeper psychological stuff from Stephen Covey, Brene Brown.
Anchored by Seneca, Plato. It's a journey, really. It forces you to shift focus from what you get in life to who you need to become.
Okay, let's kick off with a perspective on success that's, it's unapologetically material, but also framed as a moral imperative. I'm talking about Russell H. Conwell and his incredibly famous lecture, Acres of Diamonds.
Conwell. Yeah, his viewpoint really set a tone, especially in late 19th, early 20th century America, about how people should think about wealth.
It's pretty radical stuff when you first hear it.
It really is. His core premise isn't just that getting rich is okay, it's that it's your duty. He flat out argued it is your duty to get rich.
Wow, a duty.
Yeah, and he connected it directly to morality, even religion. He claimed that to make money honestly is to preach the gospel.
How did he justify that? Making money equals preaching.
His argument was basically that money allows you to do good. Rich people, he argued, have far greater capacity to help others, found institutions, create jobs, than poor people do. So pursuing wealth honestly becomes a kind of righteous act, a form of public service.
That's certainly one way to frame it. It kind of strips away the guilt around wanting profit as long as it's honest.
Exactly. But beyond that justification, the real practical insight, the thing Acres of Diamonds is remembered for, is this idea about opportunity.
Right, the central metaphor. That we're often sitting on top of immense wealth or opportunity without even realizing it.
Precisely. He uses that parable of Ali Hafed, the Persian farmer who sells his land to search the world for diamonds.
And ends up broke and miserable.
Right. While the person who bought his farm discovers, the Golconda diamond mines right there in Ali Hafed's original backyard. The point is that the great opportunities, the diamonds, are often right where you are, not halfway across the world.
And he didn't just leave it as an ancient story, he brought it home with American examples.
Yeah, he made it concrete. He talked about a young man finding one of the purest diamonds ever discovered right there in North Carolina, showing these riches weren't just in some exotic fable.
But the Titusville example, that was just staggering, the sheer scale of the missed opportunity.
Oh, it's incredible. So Conwell tells this story about a man who owned land near Titusville, Pennsylvania, before the big oil boom.
Okay.
And for years, this farmer was annoyed by this dreadful-looking scum. That's how he saw it.
Yeah.
This oily stuff that kept appearing on the surface of the book behind his barn.
The oil, right. But he just saw it as scum.
Exactly. It was a nuisance to him. He actually hammered a plank into the stream at an angle to divert the oil away so his cattle could drink downstream without getting this stuff in their mouths.
He was actively trying to get rid of it.
Actively diverting what turned out to be immense wealth. He eventually sold the farm for, I think it was $833.
Oh, no.
And Conwell says he had unknowingly been damming back for 23 years a flood of coal oil The geologists and businessmen later estimated it was worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions just floating there.
Visible, floating right there. But his mindset, his perception, couldn't see it as value. It was just scum. Conwell's lesson from that wasn't about needing capital. It was what you need is common sense, not copper sense.
The failure wasn't lack of resources, it was lack of perception.
And basic common sense. The opportunity is there, the failure is internal.
And Conwell also argued that if you do recognize the opportunity and you start right, the results can snowball. He used his own experience founding Temple University.
Right, that started incredibly small. Just 7 students meeting in his library. The first donation was something tiny, like 57 cents.
Wow.
But because it was begun earnestly, he says, and set going in the right way, it just ballooned. It grew into this huge university serving almost 100,000 students within his lifetime. It's about spotting the diamond, yes, but also putting the right energy into getting started.
So it's this potent mix of recognizing opportunity and having the common sense and initial drive to act on it.
A very powerful argument, very focused on that raw potential and getting things rolling. But, it naturally leads to the next question.
Which is?
If opportunities are everywhere, like Conwell suggests, why do so many people or companies fizzle out? Even if they do find their acre of diamonds, why can't they sustain success?
Okay, yeah. That feels like a perfect transition to the modern perspective, especially someone like Jim Collins.
Exactly, because Collins flips the script. While Conwell is focused on finding the opportunity, Collins is laser-focused on the discipline required to execute and sustain success once you have something.
And Collins' big finding was that greatness isn't just luck, right? It's not just being in a booming industry.
Not at all. He argues quite forcefully that greatness is largely a matter of conscious choice. It's about the internal decisions and disciplines, not the external circumstances. Conwell found the diamond mine. Collins figured out how you run the mining operation effectively for the long haul.
So what did his research on those good to great companies actually show? What disciplines did they have?
A key one was his radical commitment to focus. They understood that true success wasn't about doing more things. It was about doing fewer things, but doing them exceptionally well.
The essential few, rather than the trivial many.
Precisely. And he found they focused just as much energy on what not to do and what to stop doing as they did on what to do.
That stop doing list. That sounds simple, but I imagine it's incredibly hard in practice. Why is stopping things so critical?
Because it demands what Collins termed fanatical adherence to their core purpose. He called this the hedgehog concept.
Right, the intersection of 3 things.
Yeah, the 3 circles.
Yeah.
What can you be the best in the world at? What are you deeply passionate about? And what drives your economic engine? The real discipline, the hard part of the stop doing list, is having the guts to abandon activities, even profitable ones, that fall outside that intersection.
Ah, so you might actually find an acre of diamonds, a real opportunity that makes money.
But if it's not something you can be the best at or something you're truly passionate about, the discipline of greatness, according to Collins, is to walk away, to stop doing it.
Even if it looks like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Especially then.
Yeah.
Because those opportunities are often the ones that dilute your focus and pull you away from your core strength. It's a test of internal clarity versus external temptation.
That really bridges nicely into the importance of goals and mindset, the kind of stuff Zig Ziglar and Earl Nightingale talked about.
It does. If Collins highlights the need for a focused concept, Ziglar and Nightingale stress the need for focused daily action to bring any concept to life.
Nightingale had that great metaphor for the mind, didn't he?
He did. He called the human mind the last great unexplored continent, just full of untapped riches. He cited university research suggesting most of us are only using maybe 10% of our actual mental capacity.
10%? That's kind of shocking.
It is. This incredible resource we all have, standard issue, and we barely scratch the surface.
Yeah.
We just take it for granted.
So how do we tap into the other 90%? What did Ziglar say?
Ziglar was adamant that goals can't just be vague long-term wishes. He insisted goals must be daily. You need daily objectives.
Otherwise, you're just a dreamer.
That's exactly his point. If you only have the big dream but no daily plan to get there, you're just dreaming. You need to build the foundation under that dream day by day.
Like laying bricks.
Yeah. You plant the goal like a seed, you tend to it daily, you work steadily towards it, and crucially, you cultivate the right mental environment, visualizing success, staying positive, cheerful, relaxed. Nightingale also emphasized this law of sowing and reaping. The returns you get are directly proportional to what you put in. Your mind is the field. Your daily actions are the seeds. Okay, so we've seen that finding external opportunity, like Conwell's diamonds, requires common sense and perception. And sustaining success, like Collins showed, requires rigorous focus and discipline.
Right.
But now we need to go deeper. How does an individual achieve that kind of discipline? How do you build the internal fortitude? This brings us squarely into the inside-out paradigm.
Which Stephen Covey really championed as the only sustainable path to true effectiveness.
Exactly. And he issued a very strong warning against the allure of what he called the personality ethic.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly is the personality ethic, and why did Covey see it as so dangerous?
The personality ethic is essentially the culture of the quick fix, the shortcut. It really took hold in the 20th century. It promises success through learning superficial techniques.
Like what?
Oh, things like public speaking tricks, power dressing, manipulating your attitude, mastering positive thinking, but without the underlying character to back it up.
Huh.
Covey called it symbol without substance,
It teaches you how to look good, maybe sound good?
but not how to be good. Right. Not at your core. It focuses on image management rather than character development.
Yeah, I think we all kind of recognize that type, right? Someone who seems really polished and charming on the surface, but you don't fully trust them. There's something missing underneath.
Precisely. It's trying to get the fruits of good character without actually cultivating the roots. And Covey had this brilliant, sharp analogy for it.
The map analogy.
Their map analogy. He said relying on the personality ethic to achieve real, high-quality results is like trying to get to Chicago using a map of Detroit.
Doesn't matter how hard you try.
Right. You can have a great attitude, work incredibly hard, drive really fast, but if your fundamental map, which represents your character, your paradigms, is wrong, you will simply never arrive at your desired destination. True success, he argued, is built on timeless principles, not on fleeting social techniques.
And this directly connects to his insistence on sequence. You can't skip steps.
The sequence is non-negotiable. Natural growth follows a process. And for personal effectiveness, the sequence is always private victory before public victory. Meaning you have to achieve self-mastery first before you can build effective relationships or lead others successfully. You need to learn to manage yourself, your impulses, your commitments, before you can effectively influence or collaborate with anyone else.
Makes sense.
And Covey argued that real self-respect, the deep, solid kind, doesn't come from just telling yourself positive things. It comes from dominion over self.
Dominion over self. How do you get that?
By making and, crucially, keeping commitments. Starting small, making promises to yourself and following through. Each time you keep a promise to exercise, to read that chapter, to not lose your temper, you build a little more internal integrity.
And conversely, if you keep breaking those promises,
your internal integrity erodes. You might try to psych yourself up, but deep down, you can't rely on yourself. How can you expect others to trust you if you can't even trust yourself to follow through on small personal commitments? That's the foundation.
that internal integrity, that self-mastery, it feels like the bedrock for handling pressure, which ties into Viktor Frankl's experiences.
Absolutely. Frankl's time in the Nazi concentration camps is perhaps the ultimate, most extreme test of this inside-out principle. His experience offers such a profound lesson about responsibility.
What was that core lesson?
Frankl showed, through his own survival and his later work in logotherapy, that even when everything external is stripped away, your freedom, your possessions, your dignity, even your physical health, there remains one final human freedom: the freedom to choose your response to your circumstances.
The space between stimulus and response.
Exactly that space. He realized that we are ultimately responsible for our own perspective, our own meaning, even in the face of horrific suffering. We don't invent our life's mission, he said. We detect it. We find meaning out there in the world, in serving a cause or loving someone. That's ultimate proactivity, owning your responsibility.
And that choice of response, that meaning-making, it really hinges on perception, doesn't it? Which is something the Stoics were talking about thousands of years ago.
Perception is absolutely key. People like Ryan Holiday, drawing on the Stoics, or Tony Robbins, they emphasize this constantly. We don't just react to events. We actively choose what those events mean to us.
We can't control what happens to us.
But we have 100% control over the story we tell ourselves about what happens. The internal filter. You could reframe almost any setback. A job loss becomes the push you needed to start your own thing. A failure becomes expensive, but valuable. Tuition for future success. You choose the frame.
That reframing sounds powerful, but it must require managing our own psychology, especially fear. Which takes us to Seneca.
Yes, Seneca wrote a lot about managing fear, particularly the kind of fear that paralyzes us before anything bad has actually happened. He called it panic fear.
Panic fear.
Yeah, the kind that's witless, groundless, just the mind running wild with possibilities. It's suffering in advance, often over things that never even materialize.
We worry about things that might happen and suffer now for something that may never occur.
Exactly. Seneca's advice was basically, don't run out to meet your suffering. Why torture yourself now for something that isn't a present reality? If it's destined to happen, you'll suffer then. Worrying now just doubles the pain unnecessarily.
So what should you do instead?
Acknowledge it might happen, but recognize it is not a present fact. Gain time by focusing on the present, or looking forward to better things, rather than dwelling on potential future misery. It's about managing your internal state, not letting groundless anxiety dictate your experience.
Okay, so building internal discipline, managing perception, controlling fear, that builds self-respect. But then how do you move from that self-control to connecting effectively with others? Because connection seems to require, well, letting your guard down a bit, it seems to require vulnerability.
That's a fantastic point, and it leads us right to the work of Brené Brown. She's really explored this apparent paradox. Her research powerfully argues that vulnerability isn't weakness at all.
What is it then?
She defines it as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But far from being a liability, she argues it's the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences.
It feels risky, though. That's why we avoid it.
It absolutely feels risky because it goes against that tough exterior the personality ethic encourages. But Brown's point is that the armor we build to protect ourselves also prevents us from forming genuine, deep connections. You can't connect through a wall.
And if vulnerability is the key to connection, she also talks about what destroys its secrecy, especially around shame.
Yes, shame absolutely thrives on secret keeping. She points to research, like James Pennebaker's work on trauma. His studies found something incredible. The act of not talking about a traumatic event could actually be more damaging, physically and psychologically, than the event itself.
Just keeping it locked inside does harm.
Measurable harm. Conversely, people who shared their stories, who faced their trauma openly, which takes immense vulnerability, showed improved physical health markers, fewer stress hormones. So the failure to be vulnerable isn't just a failure to connect, it can be a failure to heal. #tag3. Translating character into interpersonal power and influence.
All right, so we've built this case for the inside-out approach. Developing inner discipline, mastering ourselves, managing our perceptions, and even finding the courage to be vulnerable. That builds character. How do we then translate that strong inner character into actual tangible influence and effective relationships in the world? Where does that translation begin?
I think it has to start with how we approach our most fundamental relationships. And Covey offers a really powerful, almost jarring perspective on love itself. He shares this story about counseling a man whose marriage was falling apart.
Yeah, I remember this one. The man basically says the feeling is gone, right? I just don't love her anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Covey's response completely cuts against the grain of our usual, romantic feeling-based idea of love.
What does he say?
He told the man simply,
Love her? Just love her. Even without the feeling.
right. The man protested, but I told you, the feeling isn't there. And this is where Covey delivers the core insight. Love the feeling is the fruit of love the verb.
Love the verb. Meaning love is an action.
Precisely. He urged the man to act lovingly, regardless of his current feelings. He said, sacrifice, listen to her, empathize, appreciate, affirm her. The action, the verb, has to come first, especially when things are tough and the emotional reserves are low.
That requires that private victory we talked about, doesn't it? The self-discipline to act on principle, not just emotion.
Absolutely. You can't wait for the feeling to magically return before you start acting right. You have to choose to act right based on the principle of commitment, and often the feeling follows the action.
But couldn't that feel fake? Like you're just going through the motions without genuine emotion?
That's a really important question. And I think Covey would argue it only feels fake or is fake if the motivation behind the action is manipulative, if you're doing it just to get something back immediately.
Okay.
But if the action stems from your principal character, from that inside-out commitment to the well-being of the other person, even when it requires sacrifice from you, then the authenticity comes from the commitment itself, from the will, not necessarily the momentary emotion.
So principled action is authentic action. Got it. Okay, that idea of listening, empathizing, it flows straight into what Covey identifies as maybe the single biggest obstacle in interpersonal communication.
Empathic listening, his habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Which sounds simple, but most of us get it backward.
Completely backward. Most people, Covey says, listen with the intent to reply, not to understand. While the other person is talking, we're busy preparing our response, our argument, our rebuttal, or relating it back to our own experience.
We're filtering everything through our own autobiography, as he calls it.
Exactly. We project our own movies onto other people's screens. We diagnose their problems based on our own life and then prescribe our own solutions. Here, wear my glasses. They work great for me. We don't truly hear what's being said from their perspective.
Like the parent complaining their kid won't listen.
Without realizing they haven't first truly listened to understand why the kid isn't listening. They're too busy trying to be understood themselves.
Now, Covey adds a pretty stark warning here. He says genuine empathic listening is risky. Why? What's the risk?
The risk is fundamental. To truly understand someone else, you have to be open to being changed yourself. You have to be willing to be influenced by their perspective.
Okay. To have influence, you must be influenceable.
That's the paradox. If you go into a conversation completely closed off, just waiting to unload your point of view, you basically guarantee two things. One, you won't actually understand the other person or the real issue. And two, you signal that you aren't trustworthy enough to handle their perspective, which kills your influence. Being willing to see the world differently, even slightly, based on what you hear, that's a profound act of vulnerability in relating to others.
And the impact of this kind of character-based understanding, this empathy, it doesn't always have to be some grand gesture, right? You mentioned an anecdote about a father's coat.
Yeah, this was a story Covey related, I believe, about something he observed. It was a small moment. A father, maybe distracted or just acting instinctively, takes off his own coat and puts it around his younger son, who looked cold.
Just a simple act.
Very simple, maybe even unconscious. Not a big speech, not a dramatic sacrifice, just a quiet, momentary showing of care. But the impact on the observer, the lesson learned, was huge.
What was the lesson?
It drove home this point that people are incredibly sensitive on the inside. We might seem tough or indifferent on the outside, but inside. Covey talks about the sacred ground of another's heart. When we rush in with advice, when we interrupt, when we dismiss feelings, we're effectively trampling on that sacred ground without even realizing it.
And those small, thoughtful actions, like the coat.
They make huge deposits in what Covey calls the emotional bank account. They build trust and connection, precisely because they respect that inner sensitivity. It's recognizing the person first, before the problem or the argument.
Okay, so empathy, understanding, acting on principle, that's foundational for one-on-one influence. How does this scale up? How does character translate into influence in the public sphere, like in leadership or persuasion? This seems to take us right back to the ancient study of rhetoric.
It absolutely does. And here we find this age-old tension between character and technique debated fiercely. You see a key disagreement between, say, Quintilian and Plato.
How did Quintilian see it?
Quintilian, the Roman educator, really believed that rhetoric itself was a moral art, a virtue. For him, you couldn't be a truly great orator unless you were fundamentally a good person.
The good man speaking well.
That was his ideal, exactly. He argued that an orator needed to understand justice, to distinguish honorable from dishonorable actions, because their credibility depended on it. He observed that in important settings like political debates, deliberative speeches, the audience is swayed most powerfully by the perceived character of the speaker. They trust someone they believe possesses genuine wisdom and excellence of character.
So for Quintilian, good character is basically a prerequisite for effective, legitimate rhetoric.
Yes, character dictates the quality and the impact. But Plato, writing much earlier, through the voice of Socrates, particularly in the dialogue Gorgias, was far more skeptical.
Skeptical of rhetoric itself.
Skeptical of rhetoric divorced from truth. Socrates makes this sharp distinction between mere persuasion, which aims at belief or opinion, doxa, and teaching, which aims at knowledge, episteme.
And rhetoric often falls into the persuasion camp.
Often, yes. Plato argues that rhetoric without a real grasp of truth, without genuine knowledge of the subject matter, is just an unsystematic knack. It's like cookery versus medicine. One aims to please, the other aims at actual health.
And he had that provocative point about who's more convincing.
Right. Socrates argues that before an ignorant audience, an ignorant speaker who knows how to play on emotions and opinions will often be more persuasive than an expert who relies on complex facts and reasoning. Because the rhetorician can offer simple, emotionally satisfying answers that resonate with the audience's existing beliefs, while the expert might present uncomfortable truths or nuanced arguments. It's easier to sell snake oil than complex medicine sometimes.
So Plato's warning is that technique alone, the skill of persuasion, can actually be used to mask ignorance or even promote falsehood. It's a failure of execution rooted in a lack of substance.
Precisely. The flashy techniques of the personality ethic that Covey criticized are really just the modern descendants of the kind of sophistry Plato was warning against 2,400 years ago. For influence to be truly legitimate, truly ethical, truly effective in the long run, it has to be anchored in truth and sound character.
Can we think of examples where moral character clearly trumped mere technique in the public arena?
Absolutely. I think a phenomenal example is Sojourner Truth.
Ah, yes. An incredible figure.
Think about her situation. At the Fourth National Women's Rights Convention in 1851, she embodied, as the source material notes, the two most hated elements of the time. She was black and she was a woman. The audience was hostile.
And yet, she spoke and commanded attention.
She stood calm and dignified, according to accounts. Her power didn't come from fancy rhetorical training in the classical sense. It came from the undeniable truth of her experience, the inherent justice of her arguments against slavery and for women's rights, and the sheer force of her moral character. She believed knowledge is power, and her lived knowledge, combined with her integrity, gave her an authority that transcended mere technique.
She was the good woman speaking well, embodying Quintilian's ideal, perhaps, but grounded in the truth Plato valued. Her public victory was built on immense private victory.
Beautifully put. And that kind of character-based influence, it doesn't just help navigate public battles. Sometimes it's about influencing yourself, finding resilience amidst external chaos. Kurt Vonnegut offered a really simple, powerful tool for this.
Vonnegut, what was his advice?
He spoke about feeling despair and contempt when looking at the state of the world, at the power-drunk chimpanzees, his colorful term for inept or destructive leaders. When that big external circle of concern feels overwhelming and toxic, he recommended turning inward, focusing on the immediate, the small, the good. He credited his uncle Alex with teaching him this trick. Just pause during simple, pleasant moments, maybe eating lunch under a tree or listening to music, and actually say out loud, or at least think very consciously, if this isn't nice, what is?
That's wonderfully simple. It's like a micro-gratitude practice.
Exactly. It's a mindful refocusing. It yanks you out of the huge, often unsolvable problems of the world and anchors you back in your immediate reality, your circle of influence. It reminds you that part of having character is also cultivating the discipline of appreciation, finding the good right here, right now. #tagoutro.
So we started this journey looking for the external markers of success, the acres of diamonds, the wealth, the visible achievement.
Right, Conwell's promise of opportunity right under our noses.
But we saw pretty quickly that just finding opportunity isn't enough. It demands discipline, the kind Collins described, that focused execution and willingness to stop doing things.
And that discipline, in turn, demands something deeper. That internal foundation Covey talked about, the commitment to character, the inside-out approach.
Yeah, the synthesis seems pretty clear, doesn't it? Any success built purely on the external, on the personality ethic, on unprincipled grabbing, it's just not stable. It lacks the roots. The real foundation has to be integrity, self-mastery, proactivity, and that difficult, vulnerable empathy.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, your ability to truly influence others, whether it's in a marriage through love the verb or in public discourse through rhetoric grounded in truth, it all rests on the character you've built through those private victories.
You have to master yourself before you can effectively lead or connect with others.
You have to be willing to listen deeply, to be influenced, before you can hope to have influence. Conwell might show us where the diamonds are, but Plato and Covey warn us. If you prioritize the shiny technique over the solid truth and character, you're using the wrong map entirely. You don't reach the destination you truly seek.
So the ultimate measure of effective execution, maybe, isn't just whether you manage to acquire the acres of diamonds,
but whether the process of searching, building, and relating made you a fundamentally better, more principled human being.
Which brings us back to Plato and that really challenging, provocative argument Socrates makes in the Gorgias.
Yes, the ultimate philosophical twist. Socrates manages to convince his dialogue partner, Polus, of something that seems totally counterintuitive.
Which is?
That it's actually worse to do wrong than it is to suffer wrong. And therefore, paradoxically, the wrongdoer is actually more miserable, more damaged in their soul if they escape punishment than if they are held accountable.
Because punishment, in that view, is like medicine for the soul, helping to correct the injustice within.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It elevates the entire conversation beyond just winning or losing in the material world. It puts the state of your inner character, your soul, as the ultimate prize.
So if character truly is the core of lasting success and a well-lived life, the final thought we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. Where is your primary focus right now?
Are you concentrating mainly on acquiring those external advantages? The wealth, the status, the persuasive techniques, the diamonds? Or are you prioritizing the cultivation of the ultimate internal advantage, the unwavering integrity of your own character, the health of your own soul?
As Socrates might ask, what external gain could possibly be worth more than being a just and righteous person, whether you succeed or fail by the world's standards, whether you live or die? What diamonds out there could truly outweigh the value of your own being?